This past Friday, thousands gathered from all over the country for the National Action Network's Commitment March. The march marked the 57th anniversary of the 1963 March on Washington and Martin Luther King Jr.'s famous "I Have a Dream" speech. At least one of our parishioners masked up and attended the rally. Several other parishioners staged an impromptu, socially distanced gathering out on the porch and watched the live stream of the speeches together. The day's events began at the Lincoln Memorial, where King's famous speech was delivered originally. His son and granddaughter spoke, as did Congress people, community leaders, ministers. We didn't think it was an accident that some of the most compelling speakers were preachers. And then others, to be followed by statements from families of those who had been killed by police. Family members were then going to lead the march down the National Mall, lending mass support to efforts like the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and the George Floyd Police Reform Act, among other efforts to combat the triple evils King spoke of: poverty, racism, and violence. It became clear that things were running a little long. There was a band that we initially thought was providing swelling music for speakers as they reached the crescendo of their talk, but we quickly understood that it was the Oscar band playing people off. The time for the march drew near, and organizers sadly realized that not everyone standing on the dais would be able to speak. Relatives of Jacob Blake, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Rashard Brooks, Ahmaud Arbery, Trayvon Martin, and Eric Garner, among others, were waiting. How that realization must have thudded against hearts already numb to loss. To lose someone to violence, to be promised time to voice that hurt, that loss, that rage, that sadness, only to be told that the time hadn't been managed, that indeed there were so many other victims, that our system simply hurts so many. There isn't time to acknowledge you and your loved ones. In the end, organizers had to apologize and simply acknowledge the family members who would then go on to lead the march. There wasn't time to mourn. There wasn't time to grieve. We make as much as we can, but it seems like there isn't time for any of us to mourn, to grieve, for the loss of friends and family, for the loss of your country as you knew it, of your school as you knew it, of your church as you knew it. A friend on Facebook remarked on other matters, "I feel like we need a national week of mourning where nobody works, unless that helps you, and we just sort through some things." There's never any time to mourn, is there? Today we are enjoined, among many things, in Paul's letter to the Romans, to rejoice with those who rejoice, and to weep with those who weep. And our church has too often failed in these matters. Here in this space, this virtual liminal space, among this people, we are charged to make time, to acknowledge the time that was set aside and hallowed by God for just this purpose. This is Sabbath. And here in this time, there is and always must be time. Time to laugh, time to cry, time to sigh, time to rest, time to change. Because we don't know how to acknowledge pain. Hearing the speakers that I did, I heard anew how powerful and provocative the phrase "Black Lives Matters" is. Black Lives Matter. Its power comes from simplicity, a seemingly banal observation. Black lives do not matter more, they're not superior, they're not stronger, cooler, or deeper. They simply matter. The phrase calls attention to the fact that patterns exist in our society. Patterns in which, despite the apparent progress of centuries, a system that disadvantages, abuses, and destroys Black lives remains. The phrase declares a truth that the system has seemingly forgotten. Black lives matter. Because someone who looks like me can walk into a black church and murder 9 people and be apprehended and charged without any further incident. Because someone who looks like me can hunt down a black jogger or pick a fight with a black teenager, kill them, and justice will be delayed or denied. But a black man at a routine traffic stop, a black woman sleeping at home, a black child on a playground may not make it home alive. To hear the phrase Black Lives Matter from those at the rally on Friday was to hear grief. It was to hear anger and loss and pain. The phrase Black Lives Matter was lifted up to God, too often the only true witness to our suffering, to insist on a truth they knew, but the world too often denies. Surely the phrase has social, cultural, economic, and political dimensions, and we are ready to debate all those dimensions and find a way forward. But we as Christians must attend to the spiritual first. We follow a God who led us out of Egypt, out of oppression, who desires the death of no one. We follow his son Jesus, who lived life among us that we might have life and have it more abundantly, a man of color who died unjustly at the hands of authorities, who rose again, a Christ in whom there is neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, male nor female, in whom we are all one. We believe Black Lives Matter, and we hear in those words the trauma of generations. And so bound as we are to weep with those who weep, we at Holy Cross, along with the Diocese of Virginia, have signs on our lawn that declare Black Lives Matter. Still, we are afraid or angry or dismissive of even our own pain. You see how quickly we rush to those social, political, and economic dimensions the minute someone says Black Lives Matter. You see this with a lot of grief. This week is the 57th anniversary of, 57th anniversary rather, of the March on Washington. It's also the 1-year anniversary of the death of my nephew, who graced this world for 36 hours 1 year ago. My brother and his wife had a lot of trouble with children, conceiving. And they were at the point where they acknowledged that they wouldn't have kids. They went through an adoption process, but a lot happened with that. And then lo and behold, one day they found out they were pregnant. And then the bad news came. And the news got worse and worse and worse. And Jace was born in early September and succumbed to complications surrounding spina bifida a few hours later. I watched my brother experience the best day and the worst day of his life, to become a father and to lose a son. Then came the grieving. And then came a lot of unintentional bad theology and advice. God needed another angel. Everything happens for a reason. It was all very well-meaning, but Brian and Sam got a lot of strange, well-meaning thoughts and feelings, and so did I. Because my youngest son had been born a month and a half earlier. And every time we watch Gabriel do something new, we think, Jace would be doing that right now. I was told by people that my family needed to get over it and celebrate my own son. I was told all sorts of things, all efforts to locate our grief and our pain in something rational, in something that made sense, in something that was more comfortable and something that led to implications we were prepared to deal with. You see that same push around any provocative political statement, around any provocative statement that testifies to our pain, which does not make sense in a world God calls good. This is the nasty theodicy, the problem of evil, the problem of suffering. And Christians who have the resources to deal with grief, the ritual to give it life and transform it into redemption, are often the worst when it comes to actually sitting with it. My brother gave me the honor of preaching at my nephew's funeral. And I said it was, as a young person, I always had trouble imagining why an all-powerful God would need to rest on the seventh day. But being a little older, I can imagine why an all-loving God might. Because loving is hard, and grieving is hard. And so it is when we see grief, our first thought is to locate it, to rationalize it. And God hallowed a time for us to sit with grief. God traced the lines of causation and probability and saw what would happen to the creation she loved so much, and knew how much pain her people would go through. And so she took that day and wept for us and encouraged us to do the same. When we hear Black Lives Matter, we shouldn't jump so quickly to all lives matter, to you know what that means politically. Well, what do you mean by that? Our church should first sit with that grief. Avoid bad theology. We should remember and keep holy the Sabbath that is there. That is how we worship in this time when, stripped of the hallmarks of consumer Christianity, we must find new ways to be church. Our Sundays are not the location for Eucharist or clericalism or singing like we used to. Our Sundays have to do the things that they're not used to doing. We're not used to grieving. We need to speak our truths, the ones we hold in rage and despair and pain, and hold them with others. Jesus admonishes Peter when Peter tries to tell him that you can't say those negative things in front of everybody. You can't talk about death and dying. We need hope. Happy it up. Jesus admonishes Peter, get behind me. It's a stumbling block to race to your preferred spiritual preferences. You must take up your cross and follow. So let us reinvigorate our notion of Sabbath and make time here on this day and throughout the week to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with our God. Doing justice here at Holy Cross for us begins in education, in learning how to sit with the pain and injustice in the world. And some of you might be familiar with Let Justice Roll. Parishioner Sherry Stone's completely retooled a course that she teaches at American University for a group of about 18 of us. And the experience was transformative for those of us who were able to participate this summer. I and others plan to offer some version of that course to a small group this fall, and I encourage you to look for that. Moreover, as part of our adult forum series on Sundays, we'll be offering Sacred Ground every 4 to 6 weeks. In just your normal adult forum series, we observe at 10:30 on Sundays, we'll be offering Sacred Ground, which is a film and readings-based dialogue series on race developed by the Episcopal Church. The 10-part series is built around a powerful online curriculum of documentary films and readings, and it takes church groups like ours through chapters in American history of race and racism, while weaving in stories of family, economic class, and political and regional identity. Participants are invited to peel away the layers that have contributed to the challenges and divides that we experience today, all while grounded in our faithful call of hope and love. Parishioners will be able to attend that as part of our regular adult education every Sunday, or not every Sunday, it'll be every 4 to 6 weeks to allow for real enriched dialogue among parishioners who want to attend. And of course, you can always look at the resources on our expanding list of resources on our website. That's what it means to do justice here. We learn what it means to grieve. We look at our history. We examine it and we hold it. Love mercy. Here at church and in our personal discussions, there's beautiful advice in the letter to the Romans. Let your love be genuine. Hate what is evil. Hold fast to what is good. Love one another with mutual affection. Outdo one another, not in being right, but in showing honor. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse them. Do not repay anyone evil for evil, but take thought for what is noble in the sight of all. Sometimes we just don't know what to say. Let me give you a script. Say that. Tell the parishioner you love that you don't know what to say. Don't jump to theology. Don't jump to a rational universe. Don't jump to the supposed socio-political dimensions of what you think you're talking about. Tell them what you're feeling. I want to say something that's going to make you happier. I'm uncomfortable. This conversation bothers me. I don't like where it's headed. I'm sorry. Say what's in your heart to say. Concentrate less on being right. Take up your cross and work to set things right. Confess, forgive, and walk humbly with your God. Throw yourself into the Sabbath, where we can mourn and rejoice with all the power that our church and our Savior gives us. Bring others to church. Virtually, it's easy. Just hold a watch party. Click on Facebook and click watch party, and it goes to everyone on your feed. It's a little harder with the in-person ones, and that's the awkward conversation of, yes, telling people you're Christian. Yes, you go to church on Sundays, and you'd like them to join you. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Weep with those who weep. Stripped of the usual hallmarks of consumer Christianity in this corona tide, our church must recall and reinvigorate all the many meanings of church. Let us embrace then Paul's call to radical solidarity with the most vulnerable in our society. Let us weep with those who weep. Let us share their rage and their despair as much as we can. Let us share our own pain and our own loss, unafraid. Let us see where the Spirit's sighs lead us, and let this, our Sabbath Sunday, be that day of mourning, be that time on the microphone for those who don't have it. We, the church, are charged to make time, to acknowledge the time that was set aside and hallowed by God for just this purpose. Here there is and always must be time. Time to laugh, time to cry, time to sigh, time to rest, time to change.